good morning, evening, or night. Wherever you are, welcome to WHAM today. Take a deep breath, clear your mind, and let's drift through the whispers of today's world, one quiet thought at a time. As we wrap up Saturday, 19th April 2025, let's see what stories are unfolding around us. United States is implementing fees on Chinese ships docking in its ports, aiming to bolster the American shipbuilding industry, while also discussing a potential tariff deal with China. E-commerce sites Shine and Temu, founded in China, are adjusting prices due to US policy changes. The chairman of the U.S. President's Council of Economic Advisors is proposing a Mar-a-Lago accord to weaken the dollar. The U.S. State Department may screen social media posts for national security threats, including those of NGO workers who have been in Gaza. France's Aix-Marseille University is offering a program for scientists facing threats in America, potentially due to funding cuts. The U.S. President praised the Italian Prime Minister and anticipates a trade deal with the EU. A bipartisan group of US lawmakers is visiting Taiwan, and the new U.S. ambassador to Japan advocates for stronger defense ties to counter China. US Secretary of State Marco Rubio has expressed frustration over the lack of progress in resolving geopolitical challenges, particularly concerning the Russia-Ukraine conflict, and has stated the U.S. may cease efforts for a Russia-Ukraine peace deal if progress is not made soon. The U.S. military conducted strikes on Yemen's Ras Isa fuel port, resulting in casualties, according to Houthi officials. The U.S. State Department accuses Changguang satellite technology of supporting Houthi attacks. Domestically, hundreds of student visas have been canceled. The U.S. president attended an Ultimate Fighting Championship event and has challenged Harvard University's $53 billion endowment, while lawmakers rebuked Harvard's President Alan Garber for rejecting demands for supervision by the White House. Turning to the Russia-Ukraine conflict, US Secretary of State Marco Rubio has repeatedly stated that the U.S. may cease efforts for a Russia-Ukraine peace deal if progress is not made soon, despite a minerals deal signed with Ukraine. France heralded positive momentum after talks in Paris that brought together US, Ukraine, and European officials, suggesting further meetings could help Ukraine's European allies shape the course of peace negotiations with Russia. This breakthrough follows a widely televised spat between the American leader and Volodymyr Zelensky, and Washington's push for a peace plan involving Russia. Shifting focus to China, the nation dismissed the U.S. ambassador to Japan's comments regarding enhanced defense alignment between Washington and Tokyo. Amex Gerald Yinseo, 81, changed his citizenship amid the escalating tech war between the U.S. and China. Eyeliner-based jibes at the U.S. vice president and hypocrisy accusations for the press secretary's made-in-China dresses surged online. NF chief Kristalina Georgieva stated that the U.S. and China need to agree on a fairer trading system. China is grappling with deflation and tariffs, posing a threat to trade and its workforce. Manufacturers are increasingly exporting surplus goods to Southeast Asia due to declining domestic demand and trade barriers. The medical equipment sector is particularly feeling the impact of U.S.-China trade tensions. Despite these tensions, NVIDIA CEO Jensen Huang met with Chinese trade officials in Beijing, reaffirming NVIDIA's commitment to the Chinese market despite U.S. export restrictions on AI chips. However, the House Select Committee on the Chinese Communist Party has opened an investigation into NVIDIA's sale of chips across Asia. China has developed a new rice-sized memory device capable of erasing and rewriting data with unprecedented speed. Premier Li Qiang emphasized that the market economy is largely an expectation economy. In foreign affairs, China's foreign ministry has denied Ukrainian President Zelensky's claims of supplying weapons to Russia, calling them groundless. During a visit to Hanoi, Xi Jinping urged Vietnam to resist unilateral bullying together. China is using both incentives and deterrence to discourage countries from aligning with the United States against it. China and Vietnam held two ministerial discussions as part of a larger regional strategy, and Chinese Defense Minister Dong Jun met with Vietnamese counterpart Phan Van Giang after Xi's state visit. A security expert warns that China may unilaterally claim islets for joint administration, deploying maritime militia to bolster its presence. Turning to the United States, former President Donald Trump expressed his desire for China's leader, Xi Jinping, to contact him regarding tariffs, suggesting a deal could be reached quickly, while also stating that the TikTok deal will be delayed, subject to China. Trump's trade war could give Beijing an opportunity to strengthen ties with Europe and Asian neighbors, improving its international standing. U.S. gas exports to China have halted following the imposition of tariffs by Beijing. In 2024, the U.S. imported $439 worth of goods from China, while exporting $143.50 billion to. He left the University of Pittsburgh after less than 12 months for a new academic role amid escalating China-U.S. tensions. Nepal is facing financial strain due to a $216 Chinese loan for an airport that sees limited international traffic, raising concerns about repayment. Elsewhere, the transition to cleaner energy relies on resources from China, but a recent export ban has disrupted supplies. The BRICS nations are being assessed for their potential to challenge the United States. A DRO-L, DRO-A, and DRO-B system now forms a communication and navigation network from low Earth orbit to distant retrograde orbit. As technology advances, the definition of border regions and national sovereignty is expected to encompass airspace and digital domains. Apple experienced a decline in smartphone shipments in China last quarter, standing out among the top 5 vendors. Ukraine has been the center of international diplomatic efforts as Secretary of State Marco Rubio indicated the U.S. may cease pursuing a ceasefire deal if progress isn't made soon, following high-level talks in Paris with American, European, and Ukrainian officials after at least 6 people were killed in Russian airstrikes overnight. Ukrainian deserters were given amnesty until early March to rejoin their units. DW News interviewed several who explained their reasons for deserting and their reasons for returning to the front lines. The U.S. and Ukraine have also signed a memorandum of understanding, a preliminary step towards a full minerals deal, with former President Trump anticipating $500 billion in gains from Ukraine's natural resources, including rare earth metal. The White House has not commented on the specifics. Simultaneously, Ukraine has sanctioned 3 Chinese companies, prohibiting them from conducting business with Ukraine and freezing any assets held within the country. The UK faces domestic developments, including a £1 50 pence project in Manchester to transform a hospital into an age-friendly neighborhood, designed as a national testbed for holistic health and social care with high-tech homes, transport, and social activities to combat isolation. Dark chocolate Toblerone will be discontinued in the UK after almost 6 decades due to changing tastes. Former President Trump plans to visit King Charles in the UK in September for his second state visit to Britain. The UK is also grappling with illegal immigration, as a man died attempting to cross the English Channel to reach the UK after a medical emergency. Police are investigating amidst a record number of channel crossings this year. The U.S. is actively engaged in international diplomacy, particularly regarding the conflict in Ukraine, with Secretary of State Marco Rubio stating the U.S. will reassess its peace efforts in Ukraine within days if no short-term progress is achieved. Furthermore, the U.S. and Ukraine have signed a memorandum of understanding, a preliminary step towards a full minerals deal, with former President Trump anticipating $500 billion in gains from Ukraine's natural resources, including rare earth metals. The article suggests that with promises of peace unfulfilled in Gaza and Ukraine, Former President Trump may face similar challenges with Iran, particularly regarding its nuclear sites. Turning to New Zealand. Prime Minister Christopher Luxon is visiting the UK to promote New Zealand as a champion for free trade and will also visit Gallipoli for Anzac events. Japan's defense alliance with the United States is firm, according to Defense Minister Jen Nakatani, who stated there is no reason to revise the U.S. troop agreement. Defense spending is shared appropriately based on mutual agreement. Nakatani emphasized that security cooperation with the U.S. is separate from tariff concerns under President Trump. Ambassador George Glass, the new U.S. envoy to Japan, intends to boost cooperation with Tokyo on trade, defense, and efforts to limit China's growth. In economic news from Japan, wholesale rice prices dropped by 2% to 825,876 per 60 kilograms, the first decrease in 8 months. Despite this, prices are still 68% higher than the previous year. Data reveals rice prices are almost double what they were a year ago, amid rising core inflation. Fukoku Mutual Life Insurance plans significant investments in domestic superlong bonds. Investors favor Japanese companies that issue earnings forecasts, with one Tokyo stock picker recommending Trump-proofing portfolios by investing in Toho, the creator of Godzilla. Turning to legal matters in Japan, the upper house is reviewing a bill on active cyber defense, potentially allowing the government to monitor online communications to prevent cyber attacks. A court reversed an asbestos ruling, ordering the government to pay on $6 million to a victim's family, citing wrongful narrowing of compensation criteria in 2019. Another court ordered damages to the family of a former laborer who died from asbestos disease. Wildlife laws were revised to ease restrictions on shooting bears, designating animals with a high risk of harming people as dangerous wildlife animals, and allowing emergency bear shootings in populated areas due to increased bear attacks. Socially, a survey in Japan shows that people are exercising less, with fewer engaging in physical activity at least once a year since 2010. Japan's diplomatic consistency and pacifist stance have strengthened its position as Southeast Asia's most trusted partner amidst global uncertainty. Across the Pacific, in the United States, the Trump administration has criticized the Japan-led Texas train project, linking Houston and Dallas, calling it a waste of taxpayer funds. The Israeli-Palestinian conflict persists, with Hamas rejecting Israel's latest ceasefire proposal. Hamas demands a complete end to the war and full Israeli troop withdrawal from Gaza. Chief negotiator Khalil al-Hayya accused Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu of setting impossible conditions. Hamas reiterated its readiness to release all remaining hostages in exchange for a permanent cessation of the Gaza war. Israeli military actions continue with strikes in Gaza, resulting in at least 17 deaths. Another strike hit the Mawasi area of southern Gaza, where displaced Gazans are camped, killing at least a dozen people. Israel has not confirmed the location of the Mawasi attack. Gaza photojournalist Fatima Hassouna, who documented the war for 18 months, was killed along with 10 family members in an Israeli airstrike. The humanitarian situation in Gaza remains dire, with reports of children surviving on less than a meal a day. About 95% of aid groups have suspended or reduced services due to Israeli bombardment and blockade. A photograph of a Palestinian boy who lost both arms in an Israeli strike won the World Press Photo 2025 award. Christians in Jerusalem face restrictions and hostility during Easter, with Palestinians encountering difficulties accessing Christianity's holiest sites in the Old City. Turning to Israel and its international relations, the new U.S. ambassador, Mike Huckabee, stated efforts are underway to bring the remaining hostages home. Huckabee visited the Western Wall and placed a note from President Trump containing a prayer for peace into the wall. A report indicates that former President Trump blocked an Israeli plan to strike Iranian nuclear sites. The US and Iran are reportedly seeking a new nuclear deal following Trump's exit from the 2015 agreement. In the north, tensions persist between Israel and Lebanon. At least one person was killed in an Israeli strike near Sidon in southern Lebanon. Despite a ceasefire with Hezbollah last November, Israel has continued near-daily strikes in Lebanon. Tragically, in Italy, a cable car crash south of Naples resulted in the deaths of 4 people, including a British and an Israeli woman. The crash occurred while the cable car was in operation. Italy is grappling with tragedy as a cable car accident near Naples claimed multiple lives. Simultaneously, political tensions rise with accusations against Matteo Salvini's League Party for alleged racist AI-generated content. The Italian food industry faces potential economic challenges from U.S. competition and tariffs. Meanwhile, Prime Minister Giorgia Meloni's visit to the United States saw her garner praise from President Trump, who accepted an invitation to visit Italy. Turning to the United States, President Trump has asserted a deliberate pace for trade agreements, emphasizing the financial benefits derived from tariffs. His recent meeting with Italian Prime Minister Meloni included commendation for her leadership and acceptance of her invitation to Rome. Canada. Prime Minister Mark Carney, formerly a central banker, faces his first election as Liberal Party leader amid tense trade relations with the U.S. In a Montreal debate, Carney was a key target, with U.S. President Donald Trump's actions heavily influencing discussions. Carney argues internal trade barrier removal would outweigh any impacts from Trump's trade war. A Media Ecosystem Observatory report revealed over 25% of Canadians encountered sophisticated fake political content on social media before the election. The Conservative Party criticized Carney during a debate, highlighting the risks from Trump and the U.S. Washington's tariffs and territorial threats have boosted Canadian unity, influencing the upcoming election. Measles outbreaks in Ontario and Chihuahua, Mexico, are raising concerns in Mennonite communities near the U.S. border. Mazda will temporarily suspend production of CX-50 SUVs for Canada at its Alabama plant starting May 12. El Salvador finds itself at the center of a complex immigration case involving Kilma Armando Abrego Garcia, wrongly deported during the Trump era. Actively involved is Maryland Senator Chris Van Hollen, who journeyed to El Salvador to meet Abrego Garcia and advocate for his release. During his visit, Senator Van Hollen managed to contact Abrego Garcia's wife, Jennifer Vasquez Sura, to deliver a message and pledge a comprehensive update. Vasquez Sura expressed profound relief upon confirmation that her husband was alive. Senator Van Hollen also posted a photo from the meeting on X, highlighting the ongoing effort. The Trump administration, however, has asserted its inability to facilitate Abrego Garcia's return, fueling continued legal challenges. Initial attempts by Senator Van Hollen to visit Abrego Garcia in prison faced obstruction from military officials, underscoring the complexities of the situation. Syria is seeing a reduction in the U.S. military presence, with approximately 600 troops being withdrawn and 3 of 8 operating bases being closed in the northeast. This will leave fewer than 1,000 U.S. troops working with Kurdish allies against a resurgent Islamic State group. 2 U.S. Republican congressmen visited Syria, meeting with new leaders and touring war-torn areas, expressing interest in assisting with reconstruction. Simultaneously, efforts persist to bring justice for the 2013 sarin gas attack on Damascus suburbs under Bashar al-Assad's regime, which caused at least 1,500 deaths. Transitioning to Iraq, Prime Minister Mohammed Shia al-Sudani and Syrian President Ahmed al-Sharaa met in Qatar, which marks the first encounter between the two leaders. India successfully repatriated 4 nationals from Myanmar after they were ensnared in a job scam with the Indian embassy in Yangon facilitating their return. In trade news, the U.S. defended its steel and aluminum duties imposed on India at the World Trade Organization, citing national security concerns. This justification was challenged by India, which contended the U.S. had not properly notified the WTO Committee on Safeguards. Meanwhile, in the United States, the FBI apprehended Harpreet Singh, wanted by India for suspected connections to a Sikh separatist movement, marking a significant achievement for India in its efforts to bring fugitives to justice. Iran's nuclear program remains a focal point as negotiations with the United States continue. Described by the UN nuclear watchdog as reaching a very crucial juncture. However, Iran's foreign minister has voiced skepticism regarding US commitment as they approach upcoming nuclear discussions in Rome. It has also been reported that former President Trump prevented an Israeli military operation targeting Iranian nuclear facilities despite Israeli preparations and reliance on U.S. support due to reservations among some U.S. officials. Meanwhile, in Yemen, Houthi rebels claim that U.S. airstrikes on the port of Ras Isa have led to numerous casualties. This follows previous statements from former President Trump, who pledged to completely annihilate the Houthi militia, which receives backing from Iran. France recently saw President Emmanuel Macron hosting a working lunch with U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio and Steve Witkoff, President Trump's envoy, during a gathering of European delegations in Paris. Macron also publicly expressed regret regarding the crippling debt imposed on Haiti following its independence, though he stopped short of offering reparations. Russia has indicated progress in peace talks with Ukraine, though engagement with the United States remains complex. The Kremlin aims to resolve the conflict while protecting its own interests. Russia's embassy refuted Ukraine's claims of Russian involvement in the April 12 attack on Kusum Healthcare's warehouse, alleging Ukrainian forces are using civilian infrastructure. Former President Trump awaits Russia's response to a potential peace deal with Ukraine and criticized Zelensky. Concurrently, Russia intensifies its attacks on Ukraine, and Kyiv accuses China of supplying weapons to Moscow. Turning to Canada, Prime Minister Justin Trudeau's government faces increasing pressure to address rising living costs. The latest inflation figures show persistent price increases affecting essential goods and services. The Bank of Canada is closely monitoring the situation and considering further interest rate adjustments to manage inflation. Concerns are growing about the potential impact of these economic pressures on vulnerable populations. Shifting to Ukraine, allegations persist regarding the presence of foreign fighters aiding their defense. The conflict with Russia continues to escalate, and Ukraine seeks more support from allies. Ukraine accuses Russia of targeting civilian infrastructure and committing war crimes. Despite ongoing peace talks, the situation on the ground remains tense and volatile. Yemen experienced intensified U.S. airstrikes, commencing on March 15 and targeting locations such as the Houthi-controlled Ras Isa oil port. The Houthi authorities reported a grim toll of 94 deaths and 50 injuries from these strikes, marking them as some of the most lethal in the ongoing campaign. Compounding the crisis, the World Food Programme, WFP, suspended food shipments and distribution in Houthi-held territories following the looting of a WFP warehouse in the northern part of the country, further endangering the already vulnerable population. Argentina is grappling with a capybara conundrum as the large rodents proliferate in Nordelta, a gated community near Buenos Aires, leading to conflicts with residents. Turning to Italy, Prime Minister Giorgia Meloni visited the White House, engaging in discussions with President Trump. Pakistan is grappling with widespread unrest and human rights concerns. The arrest of over 170 people followed attacks on KFC outlets across major cities, with police documenting at least 11 vandalism incidents during Gaza-related protests. Adding to the nation's challenges, Pakistan has expelled more than 80,000 Afghans since April 1 as part of a repatriation effort. Human rights organizations have voiced strong condemnation of this policy, citing potential dangers for vulnerable returnees. Tragically, violence against minorities persists, underscored by the fatal beating of an Ahmadi man in Karachi by an Islamist mob, reflecting the escalating persecution of the Ahmadiyya religious minority. South Korea's shipbuilding prowess could strengthen its hand in tariff talks with the U.S., especially given President Trump's focus on revitalizing American shipbuilding. Separately, Seoul has reprimanded its embassies for their failure to correct historical inaccuracies in foreign textbooks, which falsely claim Spanish or Russian rule over Korea. Meanwhile, acting President Han Duck-soo, a 75-year-old technocrat, is gaining traction as a presidential candidate, drawing support from conservative voters after Yoon Suk-yeol's impeachment. Myanmar is currently navigating a precarious balance, considering extending a ceasefire between the ruling military and opposition groups. This comes as the country grapples with the effects of a recent devastating earthquake. The earthquake, which paused ongoing conflicts, is also predicted to potentially disrupt China's rare earth mineral supply chain. Myanmar serves as China's main source for these critical elements, and the earthquake may have damaged mines and transportation infrastructure. Italy's Prime Minister, Giorgia Meloni, acting as a representative for both Italy and Europe, met with President Trump at the White House to negotiate more permanent tariff relief measures. Turning to Canada, a Times investigation revealed that the European spa company firm made misleading statements regarding its track record as it sought to broaden its operations within the country. Government auditors later examined the expansion and concluded that the process was not transparent and was handled unfairly. Cambodia is deepening ties with China amidst rising U.S. tariffs. As the largest foreign patron of Cambodia, China recently completed a Southeast Asia tour. Chinese leader Xi Jinping spearheaded this diplomatic effort. The region is actively re-evaluating its relationships with the U.S. under President Trump's administration. United States President Trump has set in motion a plan to allow commercial fishing within a marine national monument. His stated goal is to position the United States as the global leader in seafood production. Meanwhile, the financial strain on families in the United States is growing, with the average cost of raising a child to age 17 now reaching approximately $320,000 for middle-class families. This burden could be amplified by the president's tariff policies, which threaten to increase the price of numerous goods and services. Brazil's trade balance with China revealed a $3.20 billion deficit for February, largely driven by a surge in imports of Chinese solar panels and other manufactured goods. However, the country managed to maintain an overall trade surplus for the entire quarter, offsetting the monthly imbalance. Canada recently saw Prime Minister Justin Trudeau facing increased pressure regarding foreign interference allegations. Opposition parties are calling for a public inquiry into claims that China and other countries meddled in Canadian elections. The government is currently reviewing options, including potentially strengthening existing oversight mechanisms. Costa Rica is facing a lawsuit alleging the violation of rights of 81 migrant children. These children were deported by the U.S. The lawsuit aims to push Central American nations to contest the Trump administration's immigration policies. Singapore is preparing for a leadership transition as Defense Minister Ng Hen announced his resignation. He will not participate in the upcoming May 3 elections. Ng Hen attributed his decision to the ruling People's Action Party's focus on leadership succession, paving the way for fresh leadership within the government. Mexico confronts a grim reality as authorities uncovered a clandestine cartel crematorium on a disused ranch in Jalisco. This discovery highlights the ongoing crisis of forced disappearances and its deep entrenchment within organized crime. The incident underscores the severity of the situation and raises further questions about the reach and influence of criminal organizations across the country. The Philippines observed Good Friday with traditional religious practices, including the annual crucifixion reenactment of a 64-year-old man, marking his 36th time participating in the ritual, while health officials issued heatwave alerts. Shifting focus to Canada, Prime Minister Justin Trudeau announced new measures to support Ukraine, including financial aid and military equipment. In France, President Emmanuel Macron is facing increasing pressure over pension reforms as protests and strikes continue across the country. Transitioning to the United States, the Federal Reserve is considering further interest rate hikes to combat inflation amidst concerns about a potential economic slowdown. Moving to the Middle East, Saudi Arabia is investing heavily in renewable energy projects as part of its Vision 2030 plan to diversify its economy. Turning our attention to Brazil, President Lula da Silva is working to strengthen environmental protections in the Amazon rainforest and combat deforestation. Indonesia is strategically boosting U.S. imports by as much as $19 billion. This action is designed to preempt potential tariffs from a possible Trump administration. The increased imports will focus on U.S. energy and agricultural goods, among other trade arrangements. Adding to the nation's environmental efforts, Indonesia sees a surge in converting classic Vespa scooters to electric models. This trend aligns with the country's larger plan to encourage electric vehicles and improve air quality. Malaysia recently addressed concerns regarding racial sensitivity after Prazarana removed a deodorant advertisement. The aid, featuring contrasting depictions of individuals based on skin tone and perceived hygiene, ignited accusations of racial bias. In other news, Malaysian Prime Minister Anwar Ibrahim's meeting with Myanmar junta leader Min Aung Hlaing stirred controversy. Critics argue this engagement could inadvertently legitimize Myanmar's military regime. New Zealand is currently grappling with concerns about the NNC's Manawini's past operations, particularly regarding its possible role in securing King Charles and Queen Camilla. Adding to the nation's challenges, Cyclone Tam is causing disruptions, with State Highway 35 on the East Cape experiencing partial closures. Forecasters predict the formation of a low-pressure system near the northeast coast, which could intensify the already severe weather conditions. Haiti is grappling with a critical hunger crisis, exacerbated by gang violence and economic turmoil. Forecasts suggest that more than half of the nation's population will endure acute hunger until June, with around 8,400 people in makeshift shelters facing starvation. In Belize, a U.S. citizen hijacked a small passenger plane, attacking several people before being fatally shot by authorities. Thailand has initiated an inquiry into a video showing a tourist's confrontation with security at a Pattaya bar. The incident purportedly arose after the tourist acted improperly toward female staff, culminating in him being knocked down. Poland is currently holding a trial of 5 activists, dubbed the Hajnapa 5, who are accused of aiding refugees by providing essential supplies and attempting to smuggle them across borders. They could face imprisonment if convicted. Germany saw police launch a crackdown on illegal street racing and unapproved vehicle alterations as the tuning community convened for the annual Karfreitag event. Across global markets, Asian markets saw gains in light Good Friday trading, even with concerns from Wall Street about the ongoing trade war. The Dow Jones Industrial Average fell by 1.3%, with United Health experiencing a significant drop. Sudan is witnessing escalating violence in El Fasher, Darfur, where clashes between paramilitary forces and the army have resulted in at least 57 civilian deaths. Residents of the besieged city fear a potential bloodbath. Tunisia has resumed the conspiracy trial, occurring against the backdrop of the country's moratorium on the death penalty since 1991. Prominent opposition figures are potentially facing Sentencing. Kenya is seeing refugee girls in Kakuma, its second-largest refugee camp housing over 300,000 people, finding empowerment through the martial art of Taekwondo. Uganda's use of military courts to prosecute civilians is undermining the nation's democracy and enabling repression in the lead-up to the 2026 election. And that's a wrap for today's news, because even headlines need a nap. Stay curious, stay kind, and let the noise fade as you find your quiet. Take care, stay awesome, and I'll see you next time on WHAM Today.